Okay, members, the time is 9:34, and so we can call the Certification Advisory Committee to order, and I will pull up. Okay, members, the time is sorry about that. Okay, hold on one second here for me. All right, so first up on our agenda is to note the attendance, and we do have a quorum here today, and appreciate everyone being here. In a December, our last meeting of the year for the Certification Advisory Committee. The first up is the Executive Director's report, and in Alicia's absence, I give that report to the committee, and mostly just want to note a few things that the committee has worked on that have already passed at the board level or working their way through. This committee recommended changes to the gifted education endorsement. The board did close rulemaking on that as presented, as recommended by the committee. There was also changes to certification renewal requirements that this committee recommended. The board did, since our last meeting of this committee, did close rulemaking on that. And the board also closed rulemaking on those changes to definitions and general provisions. I don't know if you recall, but those changes were recommended by this committee quite a while ago, a couple of years ago, and the board took those up in the last couple of months and approved those changes. Those were changes specifically to provide some clarity around appropriately certified and some other items, and having the department release some guidance to help schools figure out what certifications are needed for what positions. The only other one that's hanging out there that this committee recommended is the literacy endorsement, and that's on the board's December 13th agenda, so a week from yesterday, so next Monday, and the board is looking to finalize that rule as it was recommended by the committee. Really, the only hang up on that one has been that alternative teacher, exceptional teacher pathway criteria, which wasn't in the rule, but was something else the board was trying to figure out for that one. So that's all I wanted to keep the committee up to speed on, and of course we'll keep doing that as we move forward. Next up on the agenda is the call to the public. We didn't receive any requests to speak verbally, but we did receive 3 public comments from Superintendent Kellis and Dysart, Superintendent Valenzuela and Saurita, and Superintendent Ty in Saddle Mountain, and those are attached to the agenda item number 3 if you wanted to take a look at those. All 3 of those in support of the proposal that's in front of you today. So that moves us right along to number 3 on the agenda. I'll just pull that up here. So this item, as we provided in advance, of course, is on the rule name of it is other teaching certificates in R7-2-614, but the proposed changes are specific to the substitute certificate and the emergency substitute certificate. And this actually came about after some discussions that were kind of happening on parallel tracks, and brought to both myself and to Bruce at the Department of Education, and then just sort of built from there. So before getting into the data, Bruce, as usual, provided some certification data for us to look at. And before going into the specifics of the rule changes itself, I did want to hand it over to Superintendent Scholl over at Chino Valley, who was good enough to join us this morning. He was part of those discussions I referenced about how this sort of started. And I wanted to give him some time, and also Rebecca Beebe is here on standby as well if she wants to jump in too. She represents the Rural Schools Coalition who brought this, as well as the school administrators. So Superintendent, the floor is yours. You can take some time, provide some background to the committee, and of course they can ask you some questions too if they'd like.
All right, well, thank you. Madam Chair and members of the Certification Advisory Committee, thank you very much. My name is John Scholl, and I am the superintendent of Chino Valley School District and the chair of the Rural Arizona Schools Coalition, known as RASC. RASC represents superintendents from rural schools from Yavapai County. We are bringing forth this rule change related to emergency substitute certificates in response to comments from our members about the extreme staffing shortages they are facing in their schools. Through our outreach over the last few weeks while working on this, we have learned that this is a problem facing schools around the state, not just in rural schools or in Yavapai County, including urban and suburban schools. It's not just limited to rurals. We are short on maintenance staff, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, and substitute teachers. In my district, we are, as an example, in the last 4 days, we've had 20 openings, substitute openings, out of the 110 teachers that we have. So about 5 a day. Of those 20 openings, we have had 7 unfilled positions. So over a third of our substitute openings are not being filled at this time. Also, we're a little bit unique in Yavapai County because all of our substitutes are employed, or most of them are employed through Educational Services, Inc., and they are dispatched out of our county schools office. So we actually don't employ them, but they are employed by ESI, and then there is a substitute coordinator that works for the county schools office and dispatches those substitutes and assigns those substitutes. I know that superintendents across the state are subbing in the classroom. We have our administrators that are constantly subbing. We have other teachers picking up classes being spread amongst other teachers, and this is happening quite often to get those 1/3 of our openings that aren't being filled, to make sure that our kids are being monitored and supervised in a safe manner. So this rule change allows, number one, it allows emergency substitute certificates to be issued for 2 years instead of 1, limits the emergency substitute to 120 days of teaching at one school rather than 120 days in the district, so they can move from school to school and teach over 120 days. And it creates an exception to the 120-day limit if the district verifies it cannot fill the teaching position and is continuously advertising the open position statewide on at least 3 sites, with one being a higher education institution. Currently, schools are facing extreme staffing shortages. We are an example. We have 2 special ed teachers that have resigned effective the end of next week. And so that is, again, not unique to Chino Valley. Many positions in every school district remain unfilled, including many teaching positions. District administrators like me would prefer to fill these positions with qualified, certified teachers, but we simply don't have the candidates to do so. The emergency substitute certificate allows us to hire members of our school community who do not hold a bachelor's degree, but who want to help out during these challenging times. This can include parents, spouses, and friends of current staff members, and classified staff already working in the district. Recently, many schools have their highly trained classified staff who they already know and trust get an emergency substitute certificate. And I can tell you from my experience, there are people with bachelor's degrees that should not be substitutes. And there are many people without bachelor's degrees that would make excellent substitutes and have through the emergency substitute certification process already. The increase in the certificate to 2 years and the other flexibilities provided in the rule change will help districts during this difficult time. I want to thank you for your consideration of this proposal, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Appreciate it, Superintendent. Thanks for your time this morning. I know you're a busy guy, and appreciate, as most superintendents are right now. So appreciate your time. Members, any questions for Superintendent?
Catcher, I just got on. For some reason, I couldn't get on earlier, and they got another invite from you. So sorry I missed the first part of this.
That's all right, sir. I appreciate it. Thanks for being able to join us.
Hey, Catcher, this is Frank. I don't have a question, but just kind of a added comment to what John had shared.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm in Chandler Unified School District, so obviously not in a rural area. And I'm just going to echo what John is saying. It's even in a area like us, a large district, we run into the same thing. We use ESI. That system calls out thousands of subs every single day for positions, and oftentimes they don't even pick up the phone. So it's definitely in suburban areas the same exact issues we're running into. We actually have on-site subs is what our district went to this year to actually hire people as full-time subs on sites. That's still creating a shortage for us with vacancies, resignations. So I'm all in favor of this rule change. And as John said, you have amazing parents that may not have a bachelor's degree that are great with kids and can fill a need, as opposed to someone with a bachelor's degree who shouldn't be in a classroom. So echo the challenges that schools are facing and fully support these modifications.
Chapter, this is Carolyn, and I would absolutely agree with John and Frank. I'm also, I mean, Marana is suburban. We've never seen a shortage like we have now, with teachers leaving, our sub supply. The same thing Frank mentioned. We don't use ESI. We hire our own subs, but our sub pool has shrunk to a quarter of what it was before the pandemic. It's just not worth it for subs, and they're not willing to come in and risk things. So we are experiencing the same shortage in Pima County, and we've never had this kind of shortage before. So again, our principals are subbing like every other day. Our APs are subbing. We have everybody in the world trying to fill in because of quarantine and exposures. And so it's not just open positions, it's not just people leaving, but it's also the ongoing issue of quarantining. Pima County has a pretty we have more people on quarantine than I think any other county in the state because of the way that Pima County has put out guidelines. And so it is not unusual for us to have 20 staff members out just because they have to be quarantined. So it's even exacerbated by that. So I would also agree, this is unprecedented times. If districts need as much flexibility as they can to be able to even have people in the classroom, because the sub shortage and the shortage is also among support staff. We cannot fill, we have 30 open sped aid positions. So it's not even just teachers. We are trying to get people into schools just to help in every avenue, in every position there is.
Thanks, Member Demler. Member Spear, had your hand up for a little bit.
Yes, we have actually increased our pay for substitutes recently. In addition to that, we are trialing a test to stay program with the Maricopa County Department of Health, and I would consider us an urban district. We are in the same boat as everybody else. We are having a very difficult time finding subs. We also hire our own subs. We hired permanent subs, one for each campus. That's not enough. Our teachers are losing their preps. They're burned out. Retention of staff is one of my highest concerns. And so any opportunity to streamline that process so that we can get quality individuals, regardless of whether they have a BA or not. And Mr. Scholl, I agree with you. Some of the certification processes can be laborious, and I would much rather have a kind, caring individual that is smart without a BA than someone who may not necessarily meet our social emotional wellness standards. And so I support this 100%. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you had your hand up, and that was followed by Member Garcia, and then we'll go to Member Janesh Patel.
I would defer my comments to the other members of the committee, and I'll follow up.
Okay, Member Garcia, go ahead.
Sure, I have two questions. So the changes, I know the changes are to amend the 120 days, correct, for each site. So, and it gives some flexibility for the district to move, catcher. And then it goes from 1 year to 2 years. Is there a limit on how many times it can be renewed from ADE?
Yeah, Member Garcia, that's maybe a good opportunity to now, I'll just pull up the rule itself. And then we can actually look at the draft language, and then we'll answer that as we go through it. Good transition. So this language here in subsection B, and you'll notice we have the subcert and the emergency subcert, and then at the end we have the emergency certificate also in this list in this rule. There's no changes to the emergency certificate, but they're kind of intertwined and similar. So I wanted to leave it up there just for reference. So you can see the changes in the subcert here, eliminating the 120-day limitation, and then 7 is an exception to that 120-day limitation. So it makes sense to get rid of that. And then we have some technical and conforming changes here. You can see for the substitute certificate, it's valid for 6 years. It can be renewed. And there is no limitation on how often someone can hold the substitute certificate. For the emergency sub-certificate, as you just mentioned, Member Garcia moving it from being valid for 1 year to 2 years, and then had to make some conforming change here because it originally said the following July, so that we had to clarify that it's the July of the year of expiration. Some conforming technical changes to add charter schools. And then we have basically this 120-day limitation with an exception is what is currently for the substitute certificate. So we're just dragging the current 120-day exception for substitute certificates down to emergency substitute certificates. And then the requirements down there. You can see no limitations on how often someone can hold an emergency substitute certificate. There is a limitation for the emergency teaching certificate, but not the emergency substitute certificate. And I think Bruce can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we've discussed this before. There are some educators who hold multiple emergency substitute certificates because they have different LEAs verifying an emergency. And so because the emergency substitute certificate has a limitation on where that person can teach, if multiple LEAs are verifying an emergency, that person's getting different certs with the name of the LEA that verified it at the top. So I hope that answered your question and also ran through the rule real quick. But I think you had another question too.
I didn't know if Bruce was going to present anything because it seemed like we went into the bill to people talking about, folks on the committee speaking on behalf of it. I didn't know if Bruce was going to present anything else based off the email or the attachments.
Sure. Yeah, Bruce, are you prepared to run through? I can pull up the data, or did we lose Bruce?
I think we lost him.
Could we hear Angel's question?
Yeah, let's go to Angel's question, and then I'm also looking to Mara. Mara, you can shoot me a note if you feel good about going through that data, or if you prefer to just wait for Bruce, that's okay. Member Janesh Patel, do you?
I actually lowered my hand. I wanted to just, pile on the support. As someone right now who's in a position of supporting about 15 to 20 school districts in the state, we are just seeing this need. It's just never experienced anything like this in the 20 years that I've been providing support to schools, and every level of educator in the school system is all hands on deck in the classroom. And then I also had a question about just how many times could it be renewed. So you hit all of my points. So thank you, Catcher.
Gotcha. We do have Bruce on the phone, and then I see Member Garcia, you raised your hand back up. So why don't we have Bruce run through that data that they provided that we usually provide when we run through these things, and then Member Garcia will circle back to your question. So Bruce, you with us?
Can you hear me, Catcher?
Yes, we can. A little quiet for me anyways, but yes, we can hear you. And we have the slides up if you're seeing, and I'll try to track along with you.
Perfect. I'll just go to slide 2, which is the first data chart. my computer. I'm apparently unstable, or at least my internet connection is. So the first chart shows substitute certificates. Just for background, there are currently, as of November 30th, over 81,000 active valid substitute certificates. Those are the full substitute certificates. And then the graph shows over the years from 2017 forward, the initial issuances of substitute certificates and its decline. The next slide is the 120-day substitute exemption. And so briefly, the process behind that is the district identifies that they have got a substitute in a classroom and they're approaching the 120-day mark, probably long-term sub. And then there's a process for the 120-day exemption. And so these are the ones that have been approved. Sometimes exemptions come in and they already have a full teaching certificate, and that, of course, doesn't need to be asked for an exemption. Anybody with a full teaching certificate can continue on. And there was also a limit to the 120-day exemptions of 3 years in a row, I believe. And so any more than 3 times, and those would be not approved. But those were the ones that were approved and really kind of mirror the asks as well. There wasn't really too many more asks than that over time, but we know that probably there may have been more substitutes in 120 days than were asked for the exemption. That's probably just the case. The next slide is the emergency substitute certificates. It's a graph showing the number of issuances by year, going all the way back to 2002. It's just there's the trend that people have in the past, in the heyday, in the good days, they've still used emergency subs to build up kind of their sub pool, is my understanding in some areas. The next slide, I know I'm going too fast, but the next slide on slide 5, which is just a big old number chart, is actually visually reflected in the next slide, 6. And it's the number of emergency substitutes issued by county. So on slide 6, from left is the older to the right is the newer, and then the counties go across the bottom. So obviously Maricopa, with its size, tends to have a lot more emergency sub requests, but you can see the other counties that stand out, like Apache, Navajo, and Yuma, who utilize those certificates. And so I just wanted to provide that information as a little bit of background. Although it's, we all know it's the COVID times, and so a lot of this data was during normal, if we can call that normal times, and there may have been a larger pool of folks. And so we're happy to support. We were glad to be involved in helping draft this rule language, and I'll confirm that's accurate. There is no limitation on the number of emergency substitute certificates that somebody can get. I think we've got some folks that have had more than a decade. I hope that information helps.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, so Member Garcia, let's circle back to your question or comment.
Yeah, I guess, so thank you, Bruce. That data actually helped. And what I wanted to say is, I take my position on this committee as a middle school representative very seriously, speaking to teachers what's going on in their classrooms right now. It's a little heartbreaking when the last thing Bruce said is there's folks with emergencies that have been happening for 10 years. And it's a structural institutional issue that I'm very hopeful that everyone on this committee will be able to, leverage whatever energy towards helping fix the system as a whole. I agree that these type of situations are an emergency. I have a son in school that needs substitutes because his teachers may get ill or may not be able to go to work. But secondarily, my mother is a 40-year veteran first grade educator who is now substituting almost every day. She is 70 years old. Which I wish she would be at home because she should be at home right now after teaching for 40 years. But I understand her need to want to support the community and be almost like, a stopgap from the dam breaking. But I'm hopeful that if we all know these issues are existing in our classrooms and in our community, and we're able to make these flexible decisions, both policy-wise and legislatively wise, that we can also have the conversation on how we can fix it so we don't have to keep making little little changes along the way, but we have a deep conversation about the fact that we are now almost all in crisis, almost all needing emergency folks to come in to keep our schools going. The last thing I'll say is this will not go away. Talking to other states, they've had to shut schools down because of lack of substitutes, particularly during, times where post outbreaks, A, and then B, long weekends or that Veterans Day break. Colorado had several districts shut down because they just didn't have enough substitutes. And that would be the worst thing, in my view, is not to have a safe space for these children to go and have these opportunities. And I am legitimately concerned about the impact into our special needs students and students who are needing that extra time to develop, to have folks in there that maybe don't have the appropriate background, pedagogy, understanding of brain development. So I just wanted to add in my comments, I guess, from an educator's point of view, from a classroom point of view, that this is needed because it's impacting us, but two, we can't forget like the forest, just looking at the tree, like the forest is real, still needs to be, and I'm hoping we can all work together to fix that. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Garcia. Stop the share here so we can all see each other a little easier. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns that members might have?
Yes, Catcher. Thank you, members of the committee, for your input. It's all very, very observant, prescient, and absolutely reflective of the current state that we're finding ourselves in. I do need to bring forth concerns from the special education community about extending the time that substitutes can be in the special education classrooms. That's leaving our students without appropriately certified teachers, without which ends up violating the IDEA, putting districts, not only districts in jeopardy, but jeopardizing the progress of students who require these specially designed instruction by the qualified teachers. So I'm passing that on. That is concerns from the field, also concerns expressed by Exceptional Student Services with the Department of Education. That said, Mr. Scholl, I am so sorry about your teachers. I bring you greetings from Yavapai County. I'm sitting over here in Prescott Valley and at a charter school. And so I certainly know and aware of other districts that have lost their teachers. A district in Pinal received 3 special education teacher resignations on Friday. That, these changes that is going to give us the opportunity to have more people in classrooms. They may not be highly qualified to meet the needs of special education students, but for heaven's sakes, there's going to be somebody in there at least to work with them in some capacity. Otherwise, what we're seeing is the districts are taking these students and they're spreading them out with teachers who don't know them. And that's, as a longtime special education teacher, and we've done that in stopgap measures back in the 90s when we saw some challenges and difficulties. But I mean, that's still, if they can stay in their own classroom with their peers and hopefully paras that can work with them and know them, that is still preferable to just not having any bodies at all. So as I have taken this out to the field of special educators, and we are in support of this important change, very important change that allow us to have these emergency substitute teachers at least staying within the school district and within known communities of students. So that's my input. I did have one question though, I come to think about it, on the emergency certificate, substitute certificate. This is C section 6, line 7. The added sentence, academic courses and in-service programs completed pursuant to this section may include classroom management, professionalism, and ethics. Somehow I was thinking that was going to be a should include or shall include.
Madam Chair, we, in the discussions with some of the folks who brought it, we expressed some, we relayed some of the data that substitute certificates are, people who hold substitute certificates are in general disciplined by the board more frequently than folks who hold other certificates, and that it would be beneficial if some of those academic courses or in-service programs, PD, that is currently whatever the LEA or signs off on, essentially, if we could maybe guide schools in trying to emphasize classroom management, professionalism, and ethics. It was not something that we put in as a requirement, as you can see. I think from the information we had received when talking to Superintendent Schultz, at least a lot of what they do is already hitting on some of those things. And so we felt comfortable recommending that it stays simply a recommendation rather than a requirement.
Catcher, I have a question, please.
Sure, go ahead, Superintendent.
I'm wondering if, and I'm assuming the answer is it's the same for everyone, but are we aware of any areas or pockets in the state where maybe this is not quite the issue that it is across the board, because maybe somebody has implemented some sort of an innovative plan to train or secure substitutes? I mean, maybe an example is that my good friend in Yavapai County, Tim Carter, if I'm not mistaken, through their ESA, they run a service where they secure substitutes for multiple districts as opposed to it being done internally. So, I mean, are we aware of anything out there that because people maybe provide certain types of support or training to their substitutes makes them more inclined to want to sub or have any sort of novel mitigation plans for COVID, any of those things like that that can be shared, maybe that would assist, as well as some of the things we're trying to do with certification?
Yes, Superintendent Tyree, I partially will rely on the expertise and experience of folks on the call, certainly. But from the discussions that I've had or I've been a part of, and also the data that Bruce provided that shows the number of substitute certificates going down, the number of people qualifying and asking for the 120-day exemptions going down, the number of emergency subs that has gone down significantly in this year anyways. It seems to be a pretty widespread problem. I'll also mention we had discussions, I had mentioned some of this stuff had come up on parallel tracks. So we were at a GUPPY-MAC meeting, which of course is Greater Phoenix area schools, and this had come up as an issue. Separately, of course, Superintendent Schultz is not part of GUPPY-MAC, but the Yavapai County schools have been working on and thinking about this as a problem. And I think there's been some legislative interest from legislators who also maybe aren't part of those districts as well, who've recognized that this is a potential issue. So it seems anecdotally and from the data to be a statewide issue. And I think Member Garcia had mentioned it's not just Arizona that's struggling with it. But if there's, if members have a different perspective or different ideas of pockets that are excelling, I'm certainly, I think the board also would be interested in hearing what those are. But from all evidence that we have, it seems to be a pretty widespread and issue that is hitting some more than others, but it seems to be hitting everybody in some form or fashion.
That's pretty quiet, so that probably means what you're saying is correct.
Well, I do see Superintendent Corcoran with his hand
Oh,
up.
okay.
Mine is not related to Mr. Tyree. Mine's a just separate question. So I don't know if you want to move to that point.
Gotcha. Mr. Tyree, anything else to?
No, it's just, I think what Ms. Garcia was speaking to, I saw with great interest that one graph that you had that showed Yuma County being as high as it was with respect to the number of, I think it was long-term subs certificates that we're securing. And I think it just probably speaks or adds to her thoughts that in a place like Yuma County, and I'm sure maybe in some other rural areas, if you can't hire the teachers that you need to begin with to fill your positions, then what you have to do is you have to have the long-term subs, which I think is why that number is as high as we have in Yuma. And that's, as an old HR guy from way back, that's a problem that's been there forever. So I know that and so then the other thing is that it seems to me that when we open things up a little bit to allow us to hire more long-term subs with the 120-day requirement being changed, that assists with that particular situation. But then you're taking a sub who normally would be available for a number of different assignments, you're taking them out of the daily pool. So in a sense, it reduces the pool that you have for the people that you typically would use for your substitute needs. So it's I don't know, it is a big issue, and it goes back, I think, to our inability just to hire the certified teachers, regular classroom qualified teachers that we need to begin with, and then everything just kind of slides down from there.
Yeah, Superintendent Tyree, a good question, or a good point, I think, a good question. And I think as Bruce, I don't want to speak for him, but in our conversations and usually with this committee, oftentimes when we're looking at certification changes, never want to present those changes as the solution to what is usually a much broader problem or challenges around recruitment and retention. But it's barriers, what little we can do to streamline or address those barriers. But yeah, it's a well taken point. Superintendent Corcoran, I think we can circle back to you now.
Yeah, thanks, Catcher. Chair Peasley, members of the committee. My question is the renewal and the 15 clock hours or semester hours, as well as the 15 hours of in-district. How much of an impediment is it for a emergency certified substitute to renew each year or after 2 years? Is that a barrier for continuation, as well as would experience be able to be verified? I mean, the best professional development is to be in the classroom with the kids and the experience. So if that is a barrier for us to continue to have people that are willing to do emergency certification substitute wise, then is there another option to make it less restrictive for them to renew their emergency certification? Is there another option for experience to be in that equation?
Superintendent Corcoran, it's possible in our discussions that was, and I don't want to speak for Superintendent Schull, he can speak about that as well. That was brought up as a possible barrier to try to address, but when we extended the initial issuance, of the certificate from 1 year to 2 years, there was kind of a group consensus that barrier to acquiring those 30 hours now can be stretched out over 2 years rather than having to get them in 1 year. So that was one thought, as kind of helping address that concern. I'll also say the rule, if someone acquires those 30 or more semester hours, then they're good to go. So once they have those 30 hours, they're good in perpetuity. They don't have to keep getting those hours over and over and over. We didn't discuss an experience requirement on top of that. We felt when we were drafting this and putting together in the feedback that we got, that when it extended from 1 year to 2 year, it would be kind of helping address that barrier. But I think I should probably also let Superintendent Scholl jump in there to see if I'm misrepresenting, what we discussed, or if he has any other thoughts too, as he was working on this with us.
Well, two things that I think popped up during our conversation. One is and again, in Yavapai County, as Superintendent Tyree mentioned, that we have through our ESA, most of our subs are dispatched there, and I mentioned that also. And then we have a class that's offered through the ESA for our emergency substitutes. It's 2 Fridays that we actually, most districts in the area give a premium for $10 extra an assignment if someone completes that class, just to kind of reinforce the importance of taking that class, which includes things like classroom management and ethics and so forth. So that's one thing. The other commitment that we made as part of our group effort on the substitute side is to allow substitutes to attend our pre-service days. So they could get their hours in on our pre-service days if they wanted to do that. And then we could document that and sign off on that when the time to renew their emergency certificate comes.
Thank you. So from the department, do we see any patterns that people are not renewing their emergency certifications? And do we see any issues with whether that's because of the requirements for the hours, or do we have any knowledge of the continuation of emergency certifications and how often they renew? Or do we get a new set of emergency certs every year?
Member Corporate, sometimes we do have emergency subs that don't have the verification of 30 clock hours of training during the school year, but it usually does get resolved. They can either take the additional hours or they get the paperwork they need. I think that the 2-year time frame should alleviate some of this, some of that issue. And again, like Ketcher said, if they have 30 semester hours of college credit, it's not even something they need to submit. So that's just my experience.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at it from the perspective that we want the control to be kind of at the district level to be able to help facilitate the people in our community, because I don't think people wake up every morning saying, let's go be an emergency sub. We have to entice that. We have to somehow make it as easy as possible for these good people. As we mentioned, there's many, many good people, but it's opportunistic. And how can we create that pathway to potentially becoming a certified teacher and potentially, being long-term substitutes? We're finding more and more that we have to use these emergency certs as our long-term, because we just do not have a certified, or even someone with a bachelor's degree that is willing to, in a rural community, take on a 120-day or 100-day, whatever it might be, role. They've got other opportunities. So appreciate everybody's input. Very similar scenarios in the Holbrook School District and around Northern Arizona. And thank you to Rebecca and John and everybody that put this together to bring this forth, because we've had this question in our mind for quite some time, is why the 120 days? What is the limit of 120 days? And I'm still not sure why 120 days is the number, why it's not 180 days or why it's not 90 days, or I don't know where the 120 comes in, but sounds like there's a waiver that can be applied, because I know we got some feedback from some other rural school systems that they are a one building school system. So you don't have an opportunity to go elsewhere within the district to be able to extend that 120. So thank you, everybody, for your good work.
Madam Chair and Catcher, a thought or something I'd be willing to offer as the chair or president of the County Superintendent's Association, I think something that's coming up in this conversation that there might be some renewed interest of is that, once again, what Superintendent Scholes talked about and what I had mentioned briefly about what Yavapai County does and some others with respect to not only securing the subs, running that service, but some of the training, the in-service for substitutes, those types of things. One of the things I'd offer is that in our next quarterly meeting, the county superintendents is in February in Phoenix. And Catcher, if you or someone wanted to be placed on the agenda, I'd be happy to make sure that that happens for you. And maybe some sort of a discussion could be held with the county superintendents to see about what we might offer or do to assist our school districts across the state in this particular area. Maybe we could trade some ideas, and maybe more of us could be providing, for example, some classes for substitutes to make them more effective. But it seems to be part of the opportunity there would be for those of us within our respective counties to actually do some additional advertising for substitutes in our districts by saying that we're willing to hold that type of training. And then along with the fact that maybe with the change in certification that more people would be eligible to serve as substitutes to begin with. So Catcher, if you or somebody else want to come and talk to the county superintendents, we can have this discussion with them and see about what it is that we can do to maybe assist across the state.
Thanks, Superintendent Tyree. I think I probably will take you up on that offer, and maybe I'll also talk to Bruce too, and maybe it would be good to have someone from the recruitment and retention team at the Department of Ed to kind of also loop in on those efforts and make sure we're all kind of swimming in the same direction, rowing in the same direction, swimming in the same direction too, I guess works. But yeah, I appreciate that. That's a good thought. Okay, members. I'm pausing here to see if anybody else is jumping up with anything, but if not, it sort of feels like we're coming to the point, and we have a critical mass here. So, Madam Chair and members, I think I would probably say it would be I will say it'd be an appropriate time for a motion. Someone's feeling good about it, to recommend that the Certification Advisory Committee would recommend that the board open rulemaking procedures on R7-2-614 other teaching certificates as it has been presented to the committee.
I'm happy to make that motion, Tom Tyree.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion from Superintendent Tyree and a second from Superintendent Corporich. We'll just do a voice vote, so everyone, you can unmute now. And all those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed, say nay. Okay, well, it looks like that motion passes unanimously. I apologize if I rushed that a little bit. Usually I want to pause for discussion, but and usually, remember, Madam Chair, you're the good one to stop me from rushing through the motion, but I was just so eager. So that motion does pass. So we'll get that on the board agenda probably in January, just because of the timing of how things work out. And I think I will also include some notes considering some of the urgency of the situation. Maybe the board can consider moving this along a little bit faster than it would normally, which could put it at adoption in February if they agree with that. So the last thing on the agenda is just future meeting dates and items for future consideration. We do have another meeting in January, on January 4th, as sort of a hold. I'm not positive yet. I have to get together with the Department of Education to see if something might come up. I think I've teased some endorsement cleanup that might be happening, but we got to get together to see if that's still going to be in the works or not. And so we'll certainly try to be in touch on confirming that January 7th, 9:30 meeting. I actually might also poll you all on seeing if we can move these meetings to 10 o'clock, if only because then it would be consistent with when the State Board of Ed starts, but no need for making a decision on that now. Just want to put it out there. And then the only other thing I want to mention that I should before we wrap up and before anybody else wants to talk about anything else for future agenda items is that this is the last meeting for Member Spear, who will be leaving us to continue being the board president at her school board and moving on. So just want to extend our appreciation for the 4 or 5 years that you've given the committee, and we'll miss you, and hopefully find someone, another school board member who also attends and is as active as you were. So we'll miss you.
Thank you,
Well,
Sarah.
thank you
for
very
your
much
service.
for, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the opportunity to serve. It's been an honor.
Great to have you.
Where's
All
your-
right.
Where's your?
It's beside my bed.
So members, unless there's not anything else for the good of the order.
Catcher, I just wanted to thank John again for taking time out of his morning and spending an hour with us to just, explain the importance of what we were voting on today in real time.
Certainly helpful.
And as always, thanking Bruce and his team for putting together the data.
Absolutely.
Data masters. That's so helpful for all of us. And yes, and appreciate Rebecca's time. I didn't get to tell her hello and welcome her, but I did want. I'm sorry I missed that opportunity. But and I just want to wish all of you a happy and safe holiday season. Stay well, be healthy, be happy, have fun.
Yes. And Sarah, I'm sorry we never got to meet in person. I hope our paths cross again someday.
Yes, me too. My internet appears to be stable, of course, right at the very end of this meeting, but it was an honor to have a chance to meet all of you, at least electronically.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all. Happy holidays.
Catcher, you're going to adjourn the meeting?
I am indeed right now. Thank you.